be talking about photosynthesis, life from light. All right, so energy needs of life. All life does need a constant input of energy. We talked about that yesterday whenever we talked about our cellular respiration. We get cellular respiration, we get energy from eating food. Well, plants can't make their own food, so we are what they call heterotrophs. We get our energy from eating other things or eating others. So that can be plants or animals. We are consumers of other organisms. We eat other things. We consume organic molecules, carbohydrates, fats, to break down into ATP. Autotrophs, however, get their energy from their self. So that's going to be like plants and certain types of bacteria. They get their energy from sunlight, and they use that light to synthesize or make those organic molecules. Energy needs of life for us, for heterotrophs. Well, we are consumers, we are animals, and we also have fungus that are some types of fungus are heterotrophs. Most bacteria, autotrophs, producers. So that's going to be we're going to talk about the pyramids later on and whenever we get to ecology. But producers are going to be like your plants and things like that. Producers are going to be like grass, plants like ferns, things of that nature. And then photosynthetic bacteria, that's going to be blue-green algae that you see growing on like the surface of lakes and the surface of ponds if you leave them alone for a while. So photosynthesis, we have carbon dioxide plus energy plus water is going to give us glucose and oxygen. Now, if you remember, what you should be thinking about with this guy is that yesterday we talked about with our cellular respiration that we need glucose plus water gives us CO2 and glucose and oxygen gives us CO2 and water. I knew that didn't look right. Alright, so now let's flip it. Alright, so now what do plants take? This is what humans do. What do plants do? They do the exact opposite. They take in our CO2 and the water that we produce, and then they give us glucose and oxygen. I'll just write O2. So it is a constant cycle. We take in food, we expel carbon dioxide, and they take in carbon dioxide, and they give us that glucose that we need to be able to do our chemical equation. So this is the equation you're used to seeing, but this is not the whole story behind photosynthesis. I know it might be a little bit hard to see if you'll just follow along in your PowerPoint. Photosynthesis, we have energy building reactions and then sugar building reactions, two different things. So your energy building reactions, you collect the sun's energy. You make ATP. Your sugar building reactions, you use that ATP for the energy, and then you use carbon dioxide as carbon for new sugars. Okay, so remember our carbon rings for our carbohydrates, it's using that carbon dioxide as that. It builds sugars. We have glucose, cellulose, and starch. Cellulose is going to be found in your plant cell wall. Build all other organic molecules like proteins, lipids, carbohydrates, DNA to an extent, and then they also store energy for future use. So, energy building reactions from the sun go to sugar building reactions is what gives them their actual energy. So actually two different separate reactions. The energy does use sunlight, does make energy from the ATP. Sugar building, however, uses the ATP that it was just making with the sunlight, uses carbon dioxide and makes sugars. All right? So that's giving us the glucose that we see in this equation up here. Part of the glucose, and then the oxygen will come later. All right? So ATP, using the ATP that it made right here, using it, going into a sugar building reaction, and then eventually giving us glucose and oxygen to end up with from photosynthesis. All right, chloroplasts. Where are chloroplasts located? Well, they are only found in plant cells. We do not have them in our cells. They absorb sunlight and carbon dioxide, so this is part of the sunlight reaction. This is not part of the energy building reaction. This is part of the sunlight reaction. So they do contain chlorophyll. That's what gives them their green color. Chlorophyll absorbs all different wavelengths except for green, and it reflects green, which is why your plants look green. And it's also what you saw in your LED leaf whenever we did our lab. So these are your chloroplasts one more time. If you were to open them up and look inside of it, you're going to see all these different types of membranes. And we're not going to get into what those do. But if you go on and you take a more advanced like plant biology course, they're definitely going to talk about a lot about things called the thylakoid membranes. So if you are interested in that, you can look it up. So light reaction can work with the wavelengths of light that are absorbed. So remember, chlorophyll absorbs all wavelengths of light except for green, and it reflects green. So the dominant pigment absorbs best in red and blue wavelengths and least in green. That's why it reflects green. Other pigments with different structures have different absorption spectra, which just means that they are absorbing different ranges of visible light. Because visible light, white light, is not just white, it has all different colors. Green absorbs light because wavelengths in blue, red and blue reflect green back out. So we get the light, we reflect green back out, that's what makes them look green. And remember, form, structure, follows function. Alright, light reactions. These, I'm going to erase this really quickly. These convert solar energy to chemical energy. Alright, this is you're getting your ATP from the sun. The Calvin cycle, this will be the only time that we really talk about it. We won't go too in depth. It does use chemical energy. It produces these two molecules. It takes up these two molecules. NADH, which we're not going to worry about what that stands for, and then ATP, which remember is adenosine triphosphate, to reduce carbon dioxide and build up the glucose that it needs to produce for us to be able to get any energy from it. So, energy building reactions, we're taking water. So there's the water that we need. We are taking light energy, so from the sun, making ATP and oxygen. So it's already producing the oxygen that we need. So we're going to bring in sunlight. This makes ATP energy. It does release oxygen as a waste product. Okay, so this is where we get the oxygen from for our plants. Now our sugar building reactions takes the carbon dioxide that we breathe out, uses the ATP that was just made, and produces our glucose and what's called ADP. So briefly yesterday, we talked about ATP. All right, so what's the difference in ATP versus ADP? All right, so ATP is adenosine triphosphate. ADP is adenosine diphosphate. All right, so diphosphate, why this is important is because to go from ATP to ADP, you are breaking a bond between the adenosine molecule and the phosphate. So say that you started off with something that looks like this, all right? The energy is stored in those bonds. That's where it gets the energy from ATP. Well, to go to ADP, now you're going to have two phosphate groups attached to your adenosine molecule, and then one phosphate group that has been broken. Whenever that phosphate group gets broken off, this guy comes over here and he's no longer attached, you release energy from breaking that bond. That's how we get the actual energy from ATP. So that's why ADP is important. So it is using the ATP, making the sugar building reactions, then it's broken down to ATP, it's going to ADP, just taking away one phosphate molecule, and then eventually as it goes back through, it makes ATP again. All right, so it's a continuous cycle that just continues to go on and on and on. It does build sugars. It does use ATP. This is with the sugar building reaction. It does cycle ADP back through the process once again to make more ATP. So don't get too confused on that. If we put it all together, we are making a living thing. We are using sunlight. The leaves, think of them like solar panels, solar collectors, okay? Their main job is to bring in sunlight. That can give us photosynthesis. So we need gases. We need carbon dioxide, and then we're going to have oxygen as our waste product. The stomates, don't worry about that too terribly much. That's going to be the little openings in your leaves that absorb the gases and release them as well. H2O can also come out for those. H2O, the roots take it in through the soil. That's why you have to actually water your plants. They do get pulled up by leaf evaporation. So it creates almost kind of like a sucking force as you're pulling up water out of the roots. And water itself If you ever look up capillary tubes or capillary action, water by itself can actually almost creep up a little bit. So it doesn't really need that sucking force, but that does definitely help it from the evaporation. And then nutrients, it also gets those from the soil as well. So how are they connected? Cellular respiration, we already briefly talked about this. We've got glucose and oxygen. This is what we do. We need glucose, we need oxygen. We produce carbon dioxide, we produce water, and we produce energy. We produce ATP. So now how about photosynthesis? Photosynthesis is the exact opposite. All right, this is what we talked about. Carbon dioxide, water, and energy gives us glucose and oxygen. This is literally a chemical equation just flipped around. Okay? So whatever we get from plants is what we need to be able to survive, and what we produce as our waste product is what plants need to survive as well. So the energy cycle real quick, photosynthesis makes glucose, which we need, and oxygen, which we also need. We get cellular respiration, which we have to have in order to survive. Animals, we make ATP for our energy. We get H2O, we produce H2O water as a waste product, and then we also produce carbon dioxide as a waste product. You breathe it out, and then it's used in photosynthesis. So think of it like a new circle of life for you. So summary of photosynthesis, where did the carbon dioxide come from? Well, the carbon dioxide comes from us. All right? Carbon dioxide comes from humans. It's a waste product. We breathe it out. Where did the CO2 go? Well, the CO2 goes into the plant, goes into the stomatas, the little openings in the leaves, and then it goes into the chloroplast. Where did the H2O come from? Also comes from us. All right? So it goes into the leaves. Where did the H2O come from? It comes from humans or animals. All right? Where did the H2O go? Also, this one actually technically goes into the roots. Where did the energy come from? So the energy that is produced comes from the sunlight reaction. What will the C6H12O6 be used for? That will be used in our cellular respiration. Like glucose. Where did the oxygen come from? Okay, the oxygen is a waste product from photosynthesis. So it comes from plants. Where will the O2 go? It will go to humans or cellular respiration. And then lastly, what else is involved that is not listed in this equation? It's going to be heat, okay? That energy that we create whenever we do our cellular respiration processes. All right, so real quickly, remember that for photosynthesis, plants need light reactions in order to make in order to make their energy. They get light from the sun, they get H2O from the ground in their roots, and they get the CO2 from the air, and it will dissolve into the leaves, or into the leaves. Gas exchange, CO2 in for Calvin cycle. Again, we're not going to stress about too much about the entire workings of the Calvin cycle. Oxygen out from light reactions, H2O out for light reactions. Photosynthesis, basically carbon dioxide goes in, and oxygen will come back out. All right? So, that is your photosynthesis lecture. If you have any questions, I want you to email me tonight before you take your test tomorrow so that you are more than capable and you feel excellent about going into your test. I will tell you that there are not as many questions on your test about photosynthesis because I was not here in person for that question. However, we will go over that briefly on Monday whenever I get back. And once we do that, I might throw a question or two on your next quiz at you. Okay, but there will definitely be talk about cellular respiration. If you have any questions, please do email me, guys, or message me on Edmodo. Bye.